Now, one of the most intriguing characters in the Star Wars prequel trilogy has got to be Count Dooku, or he seemingly is because in all reality he's not in the films a whole lot. He shows up in the back half of Attack of the Clones, and then is killed about 12 minutes into Revenge of the Sith by Anakin, and we never really learn much about him along the way in the movies, or about why or how he fell to the dark side, and or what he really might have been after, why he's personally doing what he's doing or trying to accomplish. And unfortunately, the Clone Wars animated series doesn't do a whole lot with the character either, not in terms of helping us understand what's motivating him. He feels more like a classic mustache-twirling villain in there, one who does evil things because he's evil, more so than anything maybe a little more complex. But there is at least one source that ties directly into the films, though it's technically not canon anymore, but absolutely should be in my opinion. But there is at least one source that does a fantastic job of telling us all about Count Dooku, or Darth Tyrannus if you prefer, and what he's really after, or why he's doing what he's doing, given there does seem to be, or feel like, in the films I'd argue, and in large part thanks to the amazing portrayal of him by Christopher Lee, there is this sense of dignity there, a sense of greater purpose that goes well beyond just being the bad guy who does evil things because he's evil. And that source is the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, which is an excellent book, one I highly recommend, and that I just reread after 20 years or so, and was going to do a whole video on, one going over all the additions in it to the film, or how it very much enhances the movie, until I remembered while reading just how fascinating Dooku was made in that book and figured he deserved his own video first. Because you see, and mind you, virtually all of this is according to the book, but Dooku certainly did have a vision. He did think he had a greater purpose, and that purpose was to help Palpatine, and unlike most Sith, or pretty much all of them, he seemed to be rather okay with his place under Palpatine, but the purpose was to bring order to the galaxy, to destroy the sham of a democracy that the Republic was, where money or who could be bought and sold determined who had power. And even though he, as one of the richest men in the galaxy, which he became when he left the Jedi Order and reclaimed his birthright as Count of Sereno, even though he could have all but bought the Republic or enough senators to essentially own it, the whole thing, the whole system, it just disgusted him, and his principles would not allow him to rule over, as he seen it, a garbage heap of scavengers squabbling over scraps. Instead, the whole thing needed to be replaced with a government that was authority personified, a human authority. In other words, no, Dooku was not a fan of the many, many other species in the galaxy, seeing them all as lesser than he or lesser than human beings. In fact, one of the reasons the Separatist leadership was made up primarily of non-humans, besides himself of course, was so that when the war was over, they could all be crushed, their systems rightfully taken over, and their wealth seized. The Empire, as we do see in the original trilogy, was indeed to be a human empire. That was always the game plan. And you may say, well, that's nice and all, I guess. But how did Dooku see himself being a part of the Empire if he'd been the leader of the Separatists? Or the leader of the CIS, the Confederacy of Independent Systems? What exactly was the plan there, or how was he going to pull all of this off? How does the leader of the enemy suddenly become someone ruling beside Palpatine? And, well, the plan devised by Palpatine, or the plan he, Dooku, was told and sold on, was for him, again Dooku, to ultimately be captured by Anakin Skywalker during the rescue of the Supreme Chancellor. And only afterwards, while a prisoner, and we'll get to how that will happen in a minute, but only afterwards would Dooku seemingly be made aware of all the atrocities committed by the Separatists during the war, mainly perpetrated by General Grievous and condoned by all those alien worlds. He would then essentially see some of the error in his ways and help bring about a peace between the two sides, and then take his place alongside Palpatine in the new government. However, before any of that, and during the big confrontation we do see in Revenge of the Sith, he, Dooku, was going to turn Anakin to the dark side after having killed Obi-Wan. This was seen, or Obi-Wan was seen as the thing sort of holding Anakin back from falling. His love of his Jedi brother was holding him back, and that if Dooku killed him, the dam would break and Anakin would fall. Though, yes, Dooku did worry that if he killed Obi-Wan right in front of Anakin, that Anakin might be a little too angry to stand down and suddenly start taking his commands. But Palpatine assured him it would be fine, that he knows Anakin and he will fall in line and start listening to you. Dooku still not 100% sold on this, and mind you, one of the reasons he didn't like Anakin in the first place was because he had a mechanical hand. Dooku saw him as not being pure human, and that a gentleman would have learned how to fight one-handed. Either way, Dooku even suggested that instead of turning Anakin, that they, or he, turned Obi-Wan to the dark side by killing Anakin instead. But Palpatine reminded him of how that went trying to turn Obi-Wan the first time on Geonosis, and that not only did he think Obi-Wan was way too old and could never be turned, that Obi-Wan believed too much in the Jedi fables, but that basically here Anakin was the real prize, that Anakin was already the most powerful Jedi in the Order and would make one hell of a Sith. In fact, the grand plan for Anakin that was sold to Dooku was for Anakin to be the general of an army of Sith, that this is what Dooku was going to turn the Jedi Order into, a dark side army, that instead of them serving the weak and misguided Republic and acting as negotiators and mediators, they would simply enforce. They would become the fist of the Empire, and they would take any and all Force-sensitive children out there to fill their ranks. No more asking for parental permission like the Jedi do, or tolerating cultures like on Dathomir who did their own thing while using the Force. They would all be turned into a Sith army, as well as whatever was left of the Jedi, whoever could be turned and didn't need to be destroyed there, they would also become Sith soldiers. And again, Anakin would lead this new army and would be embraced by the galaxy in this role after being the hero who had all but ended the war when he, or after he had captured Dooku, and had also lost his friend Obi-Wan, which would add a touch of tragedy to the whole story. Furthermore, Anakin would, oh so subtly during HoloNet interviews and such, and he would get a lot of them being the hero of the Republic, he would mention how the Senate had slowed things down during the war, and also hint at corruption in the Jedi Order that had also prolonged the war. And Dooku really thought this was all one heck of a plan, the perfect plan to take over the galaxy. However, if you have seen the film, and I'm guessing you have, you know it didn't exactly go that way, especially for Dooku. And though you could already understand well before learning any of this, why Dooku looks so betrayed when Palpatine tells Anakin to kill him, you understand it on another level when you realize the plan was actually for him to be captured, or so Dooku thought. The book even makes a note of how only in the end did Dooku truly understand the treachery of the Sith. Though, make no mistake, Dooku was very much a Sith himself. There was not some sort of heart of gold underneath it all, or an actual noble purpose, or anything like that. He really just wanted the galaxy to be what he envisioned. And the book goes into great detail about just what type of person he is or was, and even kind of describes him as a psychopath, really. It talks about how he could never understand things like friendship or love or joy, nor could he truly understand hate or anger either, despite being a Sith. Instead, he simply had this intolerance for those who lived undisciplined lives and took pleasure in the suffering of his enemies. He felt wiser than others, and with that wisdom came the right to have authority over others, and his natural place, he thought, was atop this hierarchy, the one that would ultimately be led by Palpatine, where others would be made to live the way they ought to live according to them, or else. That's where the whole Sith enforcement army would come into play. He also didn't care what others thought or felt about him, even people he considered friends like Mace Windu or Yoda, and he put everyone into one of two categories. Either they have some sort of value and can be used as an asset, or they have no value and are threats and should be destroyed. That was it. That's how he saw everyone in the galaxy, all the way up until he got his head cut off by Anakin Skywalker and was betrayed by the one he trusted, but never should have. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think of the character of Count Dooku, or this depiction of him in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. And so whatever you do think, feel free to leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.